Kia ora and welcome along to another one of our NCEA vidcast tutorials. Today we're looking at something that's a general skill and suitable for kind of all areas of English, and we're looking particularly at the idea of how we revise for our English externals. So I'm going to take you through a process. In fact, I'm going to take you through 6 R's up here, and if you work through each of these 6 R's, by the time that you walk into those externals, you're going to feel confident that you've prepared as thoroughly as you possibly can. You're going to have all the right knowledge, all the right skills, and be ready to go. Okay, so without further ado, let's get going. So the big question here is really, how do I revise for English? But actually, this isn't just an English video tutorial, because all of the techniques that I take you through apply to any subject. And this is a way of revising and preparing for any of the externals that you have. And there's 2 kind of elements to revision, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. There is the skills and then there's the knowledge. And each of your subjects will have a degree of components of each of those. And so I'll teach you how to prepare for the knowledge part of it. I'll teach you how to prepare for the skills part of it. And the way that we prepare is by the 6 R's of revision. So we've got refine, reread, research, reduce, reflect, and rehearse. Okay? Each of those are a step in the process. What I want to tell you though is that there's a 4-6 split here. The first 4 of these are about building your knowledge. Okay? So we've got refine, reread, research, and reduce. All of that's to do with the content that you need to know, that you need to have committed to your memory, and that you need to be able to use to create the essays that you're going to write in your unfamiliar text response. Now, the 5th and the 6th one here, reflect and rehearse, they're more about the skills. And everything that you do has a knowledge and a skills component, but it will be different. And you approach building knowledge differently from how you approach building skills. Okay? So we'll go through these one at a time, and that'll give you a structure for you to be able to go through in your own time and do that preparation for your English exam and for other exams. Okay? So let's start here with number 1, refine. And that really is about understanding what it is that you need to have a decent knowledge of for yourself to go into the exam and feel confident that you can write about anything that the questions will throw up at you. And again, this is different for the film and the written text than it is for the unfamiliar text. Now, I've made this a little easy for you because I've got up here really what you need to understand for the essay standards, the knowledge that you need for those. Okay. If it's level 1, you can probably get by with about 5 of these, and you'd always have themes and you'd always have techniques, but the other ones are a little bit more relevant. Okay? If it's at level 2, you're probably looking more like about 7 of them, and again, always themes, always key events, and you'd always be thinking about author's purpose in that as well. And if you're at level 3, you need to make sure that you've got all of those. Okay? So you need to have a working knowledge of enough of these things here that the questions, when they come up and they combine things together, you'll have the right kind of knowledge to be able to write on that. So with that, it's your understanding of the concepts, and it's also your ability to memorize good supporting evidence when it goes with that. So when I say key methods and techniques, you'll know if you're writing about film, you're going to be talking about cinematography, you're going to be talking about sound, about music, about camera shots, camera angles, all those sorts of things. And if you're writing about poetry, it'll be metaphor, simile, personification, that sort of stuff. Novel, it's different. Everything's kind of different within that. So that depends on what you're writing about. But that knowledge of technique is always going to lead you to a more sophisticated response. Okay? So that's what you need to know for the essays. Now, if we talk about unfamiliar text, well, when you think about the essays, the knowledge component of the essay standards is probably about 70%. And the skills is probably about 30%. Now, you still need to be able to do both well, but there's a lot more content that you need to embed in your memory, that you need to learn or be secure in your knowledge of before you go in to write that. But with unfamiliar text, it's more skills based. Okay, there is some knowledge, but it's not just about practicing the things that you've done already. So when we think about knowledge, what's really useful for you to know is the conventions or the typical features of poetry, non-fiction and fiction. Okay, at level 3 you'll just get narrative prose. It's going to be non-fiction or fiction, just telling a story. So and this stuff for this is contained within the exam revision tutorials for those particular standards. So there is material that I've put together for that before. But just knowing things like, most poems will have what's called a turning point. Often it's called a volta, which is a moment of change or contrast. Knowing that in non-fiction, the conclusion will usually be the point where the author makes their purpose and viewpoint clearest. Knowing those kind of things that you would expect to find in those particular pieces of writing means that you're going to be able to unlock the meaning a lot more clearly. And then there's also the knowledge of the typical language features that are found in each. So you need to know your simile, your metaphor, your personification. There's other things that are relevant to each one that you need to have a working knowledge of, what they are, how to recognise them, and crucially, what they actually do. So then you can take your understanding of those techniques and your understanding of what the texts do, and you can apply that to a particular text. So that's the knowledge for those two things. Now, as I said, in the vidcast that I've put together for revision for particular standards like 1.1 or 2.3 or whatever, it does cover that content. So you can go and have a look through that if you're unfamiliar with it at the moment. Perhaps it's been covered in class with you. Okay? Alright, so that's number 1, refine. Figure out what you need to know, because then you can figure out all the stuff that you don't need to worry about. And you get a really clear, specific kind of a checklist of the stuff you need to cover. Right. Number 2, reread. Now, when we're talking about reread, I'm not talking simply about the text if you've done written text standards, but that's quite helpful. I wouldn't say go back and reread the novel unless you're a really fast reader and you really love reading and you could get through it pretty quickly. You've got a few opportunities there. One is you can just skim read through. If you flick through the opening and closing of chapters, you can read a really big novel or reread a really big novel in half an hour really easily. Another place that you could look at if your texts are reasonably well known, they're probably on a site like SparkNotes. And reading the summary and the commentary there is also a good way of refreshing your understanding of those texts. Short texts are easy, films, if you can watch it again, that's great as well. But getting that knowledge and reminding yourself of the key parts of the text, that's a good starting point. But more importantly, there's the idea of your active reading and your highlighting from the notes that you've got, the information that you've got written down or recorded about your particular text. Now, active reading of this stuff's really important, and the simplest tool for that is a highlighter. If you've got a highlighter and you're working through and you're aiming to highlight somewhere around 15-30%, sometimes it'll be more because the stuff will be really, really useful. What that's doing is it's really forcing your brain to do some good learning because you're processing all that information and you're just asking your question, answering the question, through it. What's the most important thing here? What's the key thing here? Okay, highlighting and refining, and that helps us with our next steps as well. So that's really worth doing. You might have found if you've been reading a book before, sometimes you get down the bottom of the page and think, what just happened? It's completely slipped out of my mind. If you're reading actively, that content is going to stay with you and you're going to have it there and you're going to have the key parts in it, and that's going to allow you to do the next step. Okay, and so in fact the step after the next, because there's one in between. Once you've gone through and you've reread and you've thought about everything that you need to know because you've refined, the next step in the process is to research. Where are your gaps in knowledge? Okay, what is the stuff that you don't know or that you haven't got particularly much material on? And how am I going to find that out? Now, the research can be lots of different ways. It can be talking to your friend who's got a really good understanding of this, and you can sit down with them and chat about it for 15 minutes and they'll be able to tell you heaps of useful stuff about it. It can be looking online, it can be looking on YouTube, it can be looking at some of the vidcasts for the unfamiliar text material, for example. It can be asking your teacher, going to tutorials. There's all different ways of doing that. But the important thing is that you identify where you've got your thinnest knowledge and you think, right, I know that I need to learn some more about that stuff. So I'm going to do some research and I'm going to build my knowledge here. So I know that everywhere across I've got enough material on it. And again, if you're reading material or you are listening material, taking notes and highlighting is really, really important because you process and you refine. All right? Okay, so once you have refined what you need to do, you have reread over and highlighted your notes and familiarise yourself with the texts, you have researched and filled in any gaps of knowledge that you have. The last part of the knowledge building part of the process is to reduce. Now what that means is using, and honestly, use a pen and paper for this. There's a lot of research that's come out that's talked about, in terms of memorization and your ability to retain information. When you're writing on a page with a pen, your brain likes that. It's more stimulated and it holds on to that information more readily than it does if you're typing. So pick up your pen, even if you use the devices all the time, and create some study notes. Now, this method up here is the Cornell method of note-taking, and it's a cracking good method. It's really, really clever, and I highly recommend this, okay? And I'll tell you why. In fact, on this next slide here, there's a little bit more to it. So you'll see here this example up here. It's got the skinny column down one side, the wider column about 3/4 of the page on the other, and a little summary box at the bottom. You'll also notice there's a mixture of images and words. Now, what happens is you take all of the stuff that you have highlighted, all of the information that you've highlighted, and you rewrite that out in the main section here, the little bit on the right where you've got the most material there. So you might have a heading like, I don't know, setting in Lord of the Flies, or the heading for this particular part might be imagery in Othello or something like that. So you're going to organise it in terms of those things that you've refined. And then underneath it, you're going to write out the notes that you've highlighted. That writing again is getting it put into your memory. And then, this is the clever part, on the left hand side, you're going to write out keyword prompts that will help you remember the stuff on the right hand side. You can also write in, if you're writing in quotations or techniques or evidence and things like that, you can write in like a couple of keywords out of a quotation and then have the rest of the quotation on the other side of it. So the idea is that the material on the left prompts your memory for the stuff that's on the right. The process of making this material helps it go into your memory, but then you end up with this, something that's been reduced, and it's been reduced even further. If you focus on trying to cram too much wide information in when you get closer to the exam, your brain can kind of fix on one thing. And it can be a little bit confusing, and you can, if you get thrown by the question or you have to think about something else, it can be quite unhelpful. So as you're going in towards the exam, the 15 minutes before the exam, if you are just looking down the list of the key points, all the stuff there that's on the left, all of that stuff's already in your memory, and it's just a prompt for that. And then you've got just a little bit of room there at the bottom just to summarise the main, the absolute main key stuff. And again, it's all about processing and thinking and reworking all of that's embedding it in your memory. Also, images and symbols and pictures, if you like that, if you like different colours and stuff like that, absolutely use it. When I take notes, I actually have a sketch note. I have a blank piece of paper, no lines or anything like that, and everything I do is always in images and symbols and different size fonts and arrows and diagrams and things like that, and I process all of the information like that because it really helps my brain seize onto it. I know that it's embedding it in my memory better, and it's also really useful for me to go back and revise from. So mix, if that's how you like doing things, especially if you're a little bit artistic, definitely mix in images and words within there as well. Okay, so refine what you need to know, right? Reread through your notes, research to fill the gaps, reduce to make your study notes a resource for you to help put them in your memory. And if you've done all of that content, then you've prepared yourself for the knowledge, and then we need to think about the skills. Okay, and as I said, it's a combination of those two things. So step 5 to 6 here, that's about enhancing your skills. So let's have a look at step 5, the second last one. The step's called reflect. And what that means is that you need to have a sense of how you have been going when you've practiced work like this during the course of the year. Okay, what are, I like to call them your offies, your opportunities for improvement. What is it that if you can fix up this little thing that you're not doing quite right, or this little thing here that you made a mistake on this point, or this little thing, this problem that you had on that essay, or the way that you didn't do that particular thing in this unfamiliar text, if you recognize what those opportunities are, making sure that you secure your ability to be able to execute those properly next time I should say, that's going to build you up and build you up. So you need to be quite, reflective and self-coaching of this. And, these are good conversations with your teachers. It's also looking back at the work that you've had returned to you that's been marked, looking at the feedback on that. All of that stuff is going to give you a good indication of where the things are you need to improve. And then you set about trying to make those things better. The other thing is worth looking at is the NZQA exemplars. Obviously you can find those online. They're there for you, and they're a resource for you. But they're a resource for you as an aspirational kind of thing. But look at the level up from what you want to be doing. Read them carefully and closely, and ask yourself the question. Reflect on what that student's doing. What are they doing better than you? And how can you emulate what's happening in that particular essay? And if you're aiming for the really top marks, don't look at your level. If you're aiming for excellence at level 3, go and find the top scholar in the scholarship paper. If you're aiming for excellence at level 1, look at the level 2 stuff. Punch above your weight a little bit and have a look at that same standard a level up, just to see where it's possible that you can reach into. Right? Okay, there's reflect. Here's the very last one, and it is rehearse. Now, you can write 6 million essays and practice unfamiliar text all the time and stuff like that, but I don't think you need to, and frankly I think you should probably have more exciting things to do with your time. You should do a bit of rehearsal, but not heaps. Okay, I would recommend this. Plan about 6 different essays. So make sure you've got a good understanding of what your planning strategies are. Again, there's other vidcasts on this, how to plan killer essays, for example. And practice doing that, so you just feel really, you're really at home in your knowledge that when I sit down in the exam, this will be the process that I go through. Okay, write a couple of essay paragraphs, some really good ones, refine and improve those, and make sure you're doing that in the time that you've got available. So understanding that, you'll either, depending on how many standards you're doing, you'll probably have 60 or 90 minutes to do that. Well, how long does that mean that you will spend on each body paragraph after you've allowed time for planning and introductions and conclusions? Okay? For unfamiliar text, a big part of it is reading and annotating them for meaning, highlighting and making notes. Again, there's on the revision vidcast for those particular standards, there's techniques for that, and a useful kind of a strategy for formulating your answers with that. The biggest mistake that people make on the unfamiliar text standard is worrying too much about writing a good answer before they've actually made sure they really understand the text itself. And every time you practice one of those unfamiliar texts, and every time you reach into it and you try and unpack some of the complexity of it, the next time you do it is going to be a better piece of work. Okay? Unfamiliar text answers are shorter, so have a crack at writing 1 or 2 of those as well. Right? But by practicing and looking and again reflecting and thinking about what's going well with them, what aren't you happy about, the next time through going to improve it, then you're going to put yourself in a good position for the final exam. Okay, so really, those are our steps. I'll see if I can remember them all. Refine, reread, research, reduce, reflect, and rehearse. And if you go through those stages, you're going to be secure not only with the knowledge that you need, but also secure that you can execute the skills that you have to be able to in order to really excel in these exams. So, it's not one or the other, it's got to be both. You've got to have the knowledge, but the knowledge is no good if you're not highly skilled when you go to unpack the question, plan your essay, and write your essay. Okay, and again, it doesn't matter if you're planning an essay paragraph structure and you're unpacking the question and all of that material is really, really highly skilled. If you don't have the knowledge to support that, you're not going to do well either. Okay. Now, I just want to take you through some resources that can help you in your preparation for your exam as well. Okay, so as we said, NZQA exemplars really worth looking and reading carefully and analysing closely. The past exam papers up on NZQA are really good, except for the unfamiliar text papers, which are totally hopeless because they don't have the unfamiliar text in them. But for film and for novel or written text, that material's all up here as well. You'll know that as well. If you want to find some unfamiliar text to read that are similar in some ways to the sort of stuff that you can find, finding some of the online literary journals from New Zealand is quite helpful. The August 2019 issue of Takahe Journal, Takahe magazine, and you'll just find that by a Google search. You can run through a bunch of texts that are in there. Some of them are a bit weird or different, or have themes that you wouldn't have in your NZQA exam. So if you read one, you think, well, I'd never be answering something like that. Just move on to the next one. But you can just answer this question here that's up here. Explain or just analyse or discuss, depending on your level, how the writer builds your understanding of the central idea. The actual questions will always be more specific than that, but just that process of asking yourself what is the central idea is going to improve your understanding of it. And I've said at the bottom here, include reference to at least 2, but preferably 3 or 4 techniques. Now, they don't word it exactly like that, but if you've gone through that process with quite a few unfamiliar texts, that's going to get you in a better position to be able to do it when you're in front of the exam. Okay, and also look, if you search on Quizlet, I've got a few Quizlets up there for NCEA for the different levels of unfamiliar text terms that you can have. That's quite a good way of getting some of that terminology into your memory, so you can use it on the day. Okay, all right. So that's nearly us. There's a couple of shout outs here. Nice to put these at the end. Some people, a couple of really small schools, are reasonably close. Tuka Mariro out of Milton. Say kia ora to everybody there, and to Mary Hart who's out there. To Aniki Schmidt at Twizel Area School. Met you at conference recently. Nice to catch up. Hear a lot about what your kids are doing, and then we'll go to the other end of that spectrum to a huge school, Burnside in Christchurch. So thousands of kids there. Annie Boardman's sorted out your subscription there. So kia ora to everybody there, and to all of you guys for watching. There's plenty of other exam revision content out there, and now what I hope you've got at the end of this is a process for you to work through, so you can put yourself in a position where you feel like you're really confident going into that exam. There's always a bit of nerves, but that you've put yourself in the best position to do as well as you can and get the marks that you deserve. All right. Okay, thanks for listening. We'll see you later.